So welcome, Shahad. We're really delighted to have you here tonight, and really delighted to have had Scales in the festival's program this year. Can you tell everyone where you are right now?
I'm in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited Scale screened in Wales.
Oh, thank you very much for letting us have the film and for coming along this evening. I was completely enthralled by the fantasy elements of Scales. I was wondering, where did you get these ideas from?
Um, that's a long story. To be honest, with the scales, I had a short film before, Iron Mermaid. And it was so funny because, I went to film school. I always, knew that I wanted to, make films. Since I was 10, I decided I'll be a filmmaker. I'll be a storyteller. I always, kind of realized the power of story. But when I went to film school, all my films you know were not in connection with me. When you're looking for your voice, I feel that I came from the point of view of good intention films. So I started making films, kind of films that are giving advice to people. When I'm 17, why is a 17-year-old girl giving advice to people? So you use all these elements and tools to lie to yourself, so you don't dig deep and tell your own story. um, so all my stories were really had nothing, throughout film school. The first couple of years after film school, I felt had nothing to do with me, but rather had something to do with my society. But for me to dig deeper and say something about myself, that was, for me, the hardest part. And I remember kind of a year after I came back, I studied, in London, but I also went to New York and I studied screenwriting. So after a year, when I came back to Saudi, I was thinking of a story to do. And I used to write in these like diaries that it's not about me, because I try to distance myself as much as, I think for me, the hardest thing was, being open with myself. So, I started writing these diaries, and I remember suddenly this mermaid just jumped out. It wasn't something I planned. It wasn't something that I ever thought about. I never, I always loved history. I always loved fantasies. I always loved all of these things, but I never thought I would write them. I thought I will always write, like, dramatic stories or something like that. But definitely my first love was fantasy, for sure. And I remember this mermaid jumping out, not within, the film I made. It was just within the diaries that I was writing. And then I was like, oh my God, what can, and then I started researching the mermaid. And then, in kind of Arabic mythology, the mermaid, read that the mermaid, is the goddess Atragatep, Assyrian. She's the goddess of fertility. And there's different accounts say that she had, killed her human lover, or he had died, and she then commits suicide, and then the gods kind of preserve her beauty and her wisdom, so they, preserve her into that punishment too. She decides to die, but they refused to give her the decision that those seas isolated and alone, for eternity. And I was like, oh, that's really exciting. That's really exciting to use it as symbolism, for women. And I came up with a short film that, and one of the most exciting part was like, oh my God, imagine, Arab men, Arab fishermen, they catch this mermaid, and then the story came up, and a girl, sees her father chopping a mermaid in half. I was like, whoa, what kind of an effect would that have on a girl, and what kind of an effect would that have? And that was kind of the first small idea that came out of it, the short film, where it was, where the mermaid was symbolizing, this girl, and her relationship with her father. And then when I finished the short, I was like, damn, that's a really missed opportunity for me to tell a story of a woman with her body, for me to tell a story of, symbolizing, all of these was so frustrated at myself. Actually, I was thinking, oh shit, Hayat should have been the person who chopped the mermaid, because that's what we do to ourselves. That's in patriarchal societies, or in society where someone doesn't feel accepted. Certainly how I felt, where women felt like a lesser class. The women felt like not a complete being, like a man is. We refused that body. My first reaction as a teenage girl, I was like, no, I hate being a girl. Boys are much cooler, and they're stronger, and they get to have all the adventures, and why are we stuck in the house? You give us all the boring things. And so I was, I felt it's something that I went through. And the main, what really pushed me to tell the story is, I could have told a story of a girl in Saudi Arabia, and, she's experiencing difficulty with her society and she overcomes prejudice. I did not want the story. I was bored of the story. I wanted, and it would have emphasized the society struggle. For me, that wasn't the struggle. The struggle was this girl growing up in a society that tells her that her body is forbidden. Her body is not good enough. Her body is not as complete as the opposite sex. What would that have on her? And that was the whole idea of Hayat refusing the cause of that body, refusing to accept it because she feels it's weak. She feels she doesn't need it. She needs something else until she comes to term with, accepting her body. And that's why, for me, the most important thing about the film is that's the transformation that Hayat goes through, and her accepting those transformation that happens to her body.
No, I really sort of saw that evolution in Hayat through the film. Going from someone who was being really kind of controlled and oppressed to sort of joining the men in the hunt, and then coming through that and saying, actually, no, I have to just completely break out of what's going on here and challenge this.
I mean, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because, I love Basima so much, who played Hayat, and she actually acted in all my films. So, even the short film before, it was her. She's like, my muse, just, what she does, and, how she's so, you can see her inner, her inner soul. She doesn't need to do a lot. And it was so funny that, throughout the film, because we tried as much as we can to help her and shoot it chronologically. And I could feel that, I could feel literally by the later scenes in the film, I could feel that she grew up. I always tell the story that, especially after the crying scene, especially after she cried in the hatch, because Basuma was so afraid of this thing. She's like, I won't be able to do it. There's no way. And I was afraid of it, that like 2 months before going into production, we sent her to Iskandar, who's like an actor coach, and he played this game with her to make her cry. And all the other girls who I sent, the other girls in the still thing, they all wept in a second. And someone said, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. I'm like, Basima, please, And then, he did all the games with her. I was about to cry. I'm like, I'm gonna cry, and she didn't cry. And Skandar is just so smart at making kids cry on cue. And she's just like, Basuma was too stubborn, too strong. She's like, I won't cry in public. She hates being weak, and it was part of this Hayat personality, that she hates being weak. And just a day before the shoot of the cries, and we're like, she's not going to do it. And all the executive producers are on set, they're all waiting for Basima to cry, and we had a closed set. So she's like, you can be there. And Joao, she loved the cinematographer so much, she's like, that's it. And we were like, okay, fine. So we go down, and I'm like, she's not gonna cry, and a couple of people give me exercises. Iskandar also tells me, take her in partial place, tell her how important this is for you, tell her. And then suddenly, she just did it, like that day. She was like, after I had that talk with her that that Iskandar asked me to have, and I was like, listen, this is not about you, this is about the film. And then we were like, she's not gonna do it. And I remember she was like acting as if she was crying. She's like, and like, Basuma, I trusted you, I told her. And she started weeping up. And it was just this fantastic point where she, like, literally, as soon as we yelled cut, she stopped crying. And it felt like she grew as a person. I swear, she was like so in control of her emotion. It was like she, became an actor, a woman on set. And I can definitely see the changes that she goes through from the beginning and the end. And I can definitely feel that that she grew, not just as Hayat, but as Basema.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking the imagery is so strong in the film, and I think particularly like in black and white, like visually, it's really, really striking. Um, can you tell me a bit more about that? And because the dialogue is quite sparse, quite a lot of the way through.
I think for me, one of the most exciting things, like in Saudi, we don't have a big cinema culture, obviously, but so we have like television is big. We watch a lot of, Hollywood movies. We watch a lot of, watch a lot of Japanese animation that we love, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so inspired by Japanese animation. Maybe you can see that from Scales. Um, but yeah, so we don't watch a lot of, films. And so when I went to London to study film, I was blown away by how much I can accomplish with visuals, and how much I can manipulate with metaphors, and how much I can, do without using dialogue. And to be honest, just making Scales, because I was so in love with, the idea of symbolic cinema, because it reminded me of weirdly, air poetry, the way we write poetry, and it's something that I really love. I felt, wow, like our language, as a language, we really utilize images and metaphors in poetry and literature, but I don't see it in our films. Like, in our films are all based on dialogue, and that used to really piss me off, because we're a culture that really loves its visuals, from our Quran, like how Quran is very visual to our poetry, it's it's very metaphorical also, and it's very close to the language of cinema in a way, and when I got to be very interested in telling a story like that, I was trying to challenge myself to tell a story that is metaphorical, that is using the format of cinema, using the format cinema was created for. And it was definitely a challenge that I was really enjoying, because it's, to be honest, what I enjoy in writing stories and in making film is, how can I connect this story with a metaphor? How can I tell the story silently? How can I imply the emotions by using certain frames? How can I, imply characters' emotions by using certain metaphors? So that was always how I was going to do Scales. It was never going to be, my biggest worry was for it to be a fantasy movie, to be honest. That was like my biggest concern. So every time, I remember I'd go back to the hero's journey, for example, so I read and I was like, oh no, I'll do this differently, I'll do this. And I go back to, I didn't want it to have that fantasy element. And I remember a lot of producers, or a lot of people who worked on the film were confused. We're like, but we're not explaining this, metaphor, we're not explaining this mythology. But then I was like, then it's going to become a fantasy film. The film is not a fantasy film. It's about this girl and herself. It's about this girl and her body. It's not about all of the extra stuff that happens around her. No, it's the story of her, of a girl's body rebelling against her, and she has to find her way to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. I want to go into a bit more about that metaphor. And for me, one of my readings of the film is that I think there's quite a strong, like, eco-dystopian and eco-feminist dimension to it. I was wondering if that's intentional, or whether that's just me bringing my interest, because, I feel that women's equality has to be at the heart of us tackling climate change and environmental, degradation.
I mean, for sure, to be honest, for sure, for me, the film wasn't, one of the most exciting part about setting the film in that world was that I get to deal with a lot of subjects. It wasn't just, a woman's story. I feel it was this international story, and definitely all of the elements of, and what was very amazing for me about the journey of Hayat is I could be spiritual about it. And I love to go to, kind of spirituality. Of course, for the environment, it was definitely part of it, but not the main part of it, but it definitely played a role in building this world, and what the world had, gone through, and, representing us as humans in a way.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. I think I'm ready to open it up to the floor for questions now. So if anybody has any questions that they are burning to ask of Shahad, please do raise your hand and Neil will come round to you. Or you can pop your questions in the chat. Nia, did you have any questions you were interested in asking?
Bring myself forward. Yeah, I suppose something I'm quite curious about, because I've seen recently, so I'm a fan of horror films. I run a horror festival, so obviously I have to ask something about this. Yeah. And I've seen a couple of films recently that have also been sort of mermaid tales, but very much more in a sort of more traditional like horror film mode. But they have been ones that have also been telling very particular like female stories, I suppose. So I just wondered, I mean, you've kind of touched on the fact that for you, sort of researching that like mermaid mythology sort of resonated with you in terms of telling a girl's story. I just wondered whether you think there's sort of, are there any other fairy tales or mythologies or creatures that you're interested in that you can kind of, that you feel relates to anything, or are you really sort of not obsessed? That's the wrong way of putting it. Are you really into the mermaid thing?
No, a lot of people think I'm really into mermaids. You know, I haven't, you know, I definitely loved, what's it called in English? You know, I don't, 1001 Night, you know, in Arabic, you know, that the mythology kind of, the fable book, you know, that tells, so it has a lot of mermaid stories. So maybe that had inspired, you know, subconsciously inspired that mermaid to come out to me, the Scales mermaid and the Iron mermaid. But it was so surprising. That's what's so beautiful for me about you know, making this film and, you know, spending years, you know, because I did Iron Mermaid in 2012. And I spent 6 years after that developing Scales, trying to get it off the ground, and before that a year making the short film. So it was incredible to, you know, enter that journey of, you know, mermaids. It's something that I've never expected doing, and I never thought my first feature would be, you know, about mermaids. And yeah, but it just happened. So I'm always open to new ideas that can come. You know, a writer professor of mine used to say, you know, you're not writing enough if you're not dreaming of weird mythological creatures that are appearing only to you. So I'm always open to, please come, any creature that want to come in my dreams, yes, please. But yeah, the mermaid was always for me a representation of, you know, the adult body of woman. The mermaid for me was always, you know, a tool to tell the story of a haya, to tell, you know, to tell a story of a girl living in patriarchal world, but tell it also in a way that is very visual and very visceral.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah.
I've just noticed there's a question from someone else in the audience. This in the chat, so shall I read that one out? It's so the question is from Catherine Riley, and she says, "Congratulations on your visually stunning film. Following the success of your debut feature film, are you working on another project at present?"
Right now I'm working on sorry, I can't let it go. Right now I'm working on a television show, but as a writer only, and it's historic. It's based on a true story. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. But I'm not doing films of my own, or no, not one idea struck me as, you know, like Scales was a war. Like, I had to make it. I was like, this is so important. This is not just a film. You know, when I was making it, I felt it was a must, and I felt it had to be made. But right now I don't have any films that I'm making, but I am very excited about this show that I'm part of the writing team, and it's historic. It's about King Faisal. It's really nice. It should be really nice.
think there's another question in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, the next question from Anton is, many thanks for the film, which I loved. It presents patriarchy as a net in which all the characters, male and female, have become trapped. Near the end, Hayat suggests to the elder fisherman that maybe they should have done things differently. Was it important to you not to reveal what that alternative might be?
Yes, of course. To be honest, for me, a lot of people were like, even when we were discussing the ending, they were like, oh, but we have to, how are they gonna survive? Like people were so concerned of how the villagers will survive. There are no mermaids, how will they eat? And for me, that was never the answer. For me, that wasn't the question that the film was asking. And the question that the film was asking, whether Hayat was going to accept this body, Hayat was going to accept herself the way she is or not. What happened to the villagers afterward? I mean, I think human beings are capable of surviving anything. And I think, we should assume that people who used to eat their own daughters to survive, they'll find a way, I'm sure. Don't worry about them.
I can see David's got his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the film, Shahad. You said how long you spent, developing it and living with the mermaids, as it were, and making a short and so on. But you also said earlier that Saudi Arabia is not a cinema culture. So I just wondered who you had in mind as the audience for it, in a sense. Why weren't you making TV like you're working on a TV show now? What did you think would become of the film and who would be the audience?
I mean, I was, to be honest, I thought of the idea when I was, 25, 24, and I was definitely just an arrogant filmmaker. I wish I had the arrogance I had when I was making Scales, to be honest, because I was just like, yes, everyone's gonna watch this. Like, I decided things, I to be honest, I thought much more people were gonna watch it, but really, I did believe that if I made a story, I did believe that Scales was very, I felt that my approach, I felt I was trying to be very modern in my approach, especially in the way that I wanted it to be immersive. And I felt that will draw a lot of audiences. And I felt the idea that you get to experience what Hayat is experiencing and you get to go through an immersive journey with her is something that, not a lot of films do, but when they do it, it's just magical and you cannot get out of the film. You're just in it, I feel this is what excited me the most about Scales, is that it's this one journey that you follow, that you don't get out of sight of it. You see the story from Hayat's point of view, and that was for me the biggest selling point, is you see the story from that girl's point of view only. And I felt that immersiveness will get audiences to come and see it. And to be honest, yeah, I was just arrogant, I guess. So audience did come and see it, but of course, I thought it was also going to do good mainstream. To be honest, I wasn't planning on doing an art house film. I was planning on doing a film for everyone. But it turns out it's an art house film, and it turns out that not everyone wants to watch it. So I'll think differently, I guess, next time, or I won't.
Thanks, Shahad.
I think I can see that Elias has his hand up, so I'll just swap you in.
Hi, hello. I just wanted to say I saw your film today, and I just thought it was phenomenal and a real success on just so many levels. I loved some of the stylistic choices that you made as well. I was quite curious about why, for example, it was shot in black and white. I also just the visual effects were done so beautifully and subtly, and I loved there was some, the moments where the water just took my breath away. But yeah, just curious to know what were some of the thoughts behind some of those stylistic choices of shooting in black and white, and who your sort of inspirations were in terms of other filmmakers or writers, who sort of inspired you to your own filmmaking, if anyone?
So basically it wasn't actually, I'm glad that you like the black and white, because it wasn't shot in black and white. We shot it in colors, and we also colored it in colors. So, we were like final on colors, and then we decided to, it felt that the film was too beautiful, and it felt that the film was giving, looked like more like a tropical island, rather than this harsh living environment. And we thought, we switched a couple of scenes to black and white to just see how they look, and they looked amazing. We were, they highlighted the structure of the rock, they highlighted the actors' faces, and most importantly, it gave this film this quality that it, timeless, it doesn't age. And that was the biggest selling point. And we went, and although we had colored it, we went to another colorist, with my cinematographer Joao, who's Portuguese. We went to Portugal and colored with this amazing colorist who really did a fantastic job. Everyone comes up and says, it looks like you shot in black and white. And I was like, it was all him. He just did really a fantastic job with the black and white. And it just, I'm so happy that we went with the black and white, because with it really gave the story this fable-like quality. And yeah, it made the film that it doesn't feel like it can age. So yeah, I was happy with that decision. About the VFX, I'm gonna make sure, I will tell Pietro, our VFX guy, because it was one of the things that were, because we don't have the budget of like a big Hollywood film where you can do, and everyone tells you, avoid fantasy, avoid, creatures. So, because, no one's going to do it better than Hollywood. So, the key is not to try and beat them, is just try and put small little VFX shots that will work, but not a lot, not, it's not about the VFX, or it's not, it's a very intimate and dramatic story, and it's not really about, the show or the spectacle. But for sure, with the water going out and the water coming in, we wanted a spectacle. We were like, this is where we need a spectacle. And we got Pietro, our Italian VFX guy, and he was, to be honest, he was just going insane by the end. He was like, the hardest thing to do is water stimulation. You can't do. And he would explain to me things, and I'm like, Pietro, I can't help you. And he's like, no, I'm done. And at one point he sends like email, like, I'm thinking about like literally ending things. And I'm like, what ending things? Tell me you have a solution. And so the Venice Day is nearing, and he doesn't have like a big solutions for the VFX. And he hires the best guys in Europe, and they're all trying to, because no matter what you do with water, you still see little flickers that it feels like a computer generated effect. And at the end, thankfully, he just got it right. And, after so many tries, but to be honest, hats off to him, because it was, one of the hardest jobs. And, every time it took time to render, and he thinks he's done it. No, the hardest shot coming back around the water did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it's a wonderful showcase for his
yeah, no, he's fantastic. Really, it was so hard. And
yeah, no, congratulations as well. I look forward to following your journey as an author and filmmaker.
I'm so happy you enjoyed the experience.
I think there's another question in the chat.
There's a question from Neil, and Neil asks, the films of Haifa Al-Mansour have also been well received in the UK. Shahad, do you feel that perhaps Saudi women have a stronger cinematic voice than Saudi men at the moment?
I definitely, there's a feeling going on that it's kind of a female-led industry in Saudi, ironically, and even a lot of it, not just Haifa, there's Ahad Kamil, there's Faiza Amba, there's a lot of female filmmakers, Hanal Amir, like, I would say a lot of names, and they're known in Saudi, and they're all female. And I don't know, maybe because, to be honest, in television you'd have more male names than female, but I feel a big reason of it is I feel, people didn't expect much out of Saudi girls, so I think they have a more reason to prove themselves. And I think from my experience, every time I do meet a female filmmaker, they're very aware of their voices. And I don't see, I have a lot of male filmmakers, Saudi, so I don't want to make them feel bad. They're fantastic. A lot of them are great, but more so with women, I feel that they're more aware of their voices and the stories that they want to tell, because they're more, I think they're more open to being in touch with their agony and being in touch, and they're more open about telling their stories. And I feel that's what Haifa did. I feel that that's what a lot of female filmmakers do. But with male filmmakers, for some reason, they always want to, they always start their stories. It's like, you see that, American film, I'll do the same thing. And I'm like, how is that going to work? Like it feels like they're always inspired by, something in Western cinema, and it feels they don't want to tell their story. They'd rather tell other people's story. And I think if they learn to tell their story, and I think the most important thing is if they learn to be open with themselves and tell the story in their voice and not try and, kind of mimic American films. I think that's when we'll see more male voices.
Mm-hmm. Have we got any other questions from anyone in the audience? Joe, you've got your hand raised. Hi, Joe.
Hi. Related to the last question, and also the fact that you mentioned that you were writing for television, I wondered if the film and TV culture in Saudi Arabia is changing. I've heard that there's much more of a move to create sort of homegrown soaps now.
Yes, it's definitely one of the biggest things, like the interest in films and the interest in, kind of creating culture. I'm not sure if you can do that, but the interest in that is definitely, since the opening of cinema, has definitely risen. A lot of people want to be filmmakers. There's a lot of support that's happening from the Ministry of Culture for filmmakers, and we're very thankful for that, because a couple of years we'd have film festival in hiding, but now it's not just it's in the open, it's that it's been really supported by the government and the Ministry of Culture in specific. So this is very exciting. I'm sorry, I forgot the next question.
No, I mean that was the question.
Yeah,
yes. Thank you. Yeah.
It's definitely opening it up, and
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just asking about soaps and
so
TV.
With TV, I mean, I think TV is the hardest to change, because TV has a very rooted culture, kind of like, especially in Saudi, we do a lot of comedies, the same ones, same tired old ones. They keep happening. Not that I don't love them. I love the Saudi comedies that happen, every now and then, but it's kind of you don't take risks anymore, because what's working in television and people are watching the same thing. And with films, not everyone is watching it. When you do a film, not everyone in Saudi is going to watch it. But if you do a television show that's on NBC or in a very high network, everyone will watch it. So the hope is, like, what I'm seeing in television is that they are taking chances on younger filmmakers. But still the mainstream ones are still the guys from 20 years ago, or the guys from like even 30 years ago. But with like the show we're writing, it's very different. We're writing a show that's that's structured and formatted, and that has a plot for each episode. So we're more writing kind of in the American format, but in our voices. And a lot of filmmakers are doing the same. So hopefully in the next couple of years and next couple of months, because even Netflix is entering kind of the Saudi market with very talented people who are who have a YouTube, Fast 11. So hopefully in the next couple of months you'll see a lot of work coming out from Saudi that is that is different than than the work that's been coming out for the last 30 years or so.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for the film.
We'll see what happens.
Cheers.
Have we got any more questions from the audience? So I'll come in then with one last question before thanking Shahad very much for joining us this evening. It's really just like a general question about what's life like there in Saudi Arabia at the moment. Are cinemas open?
Cinemas open, yes. I screened Scales in Saudi during the COVID thing, but we were open because we closed for a month and we reopened 5 days ago. So everything we opened, cinemas are opened. Scales premiered in Riyadh, in the capital. It was incredible. People really enjoyed the film, and like 4 films. So every week there was like a new Saudi film, in theater. So it was fantastic. So things are good.
That's great to hear. And also, like looking from the outside in, it seems like with your work and Haifel Al-Mansur's work, that cinema is almost nurturing the seedlings of feminism and sort of emancipation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you want to make films because you feel that there are conversation missing from our society, conversation that we are not having. And I think definitely making more films, about our experience, our perspective, the female perspective, because that's the perspective that's been silent, not just in Saudi. I think all over the world, mostly that's the perspective that's been silenced. And for us to have that platform to tell our stories, and I think more than, I think the most important thing is to tell an emotional story, because I think that's what people react to, is something that they can feel. And for me, that's why it was important to tell Scales. It was important to tell the story of Scales because it was told from my point of view, a girl who grew up in Saudi, a girl who, knows the feeling of having this, very male society dominating, the female. So I do hope that more films, not just about feminism or, females in Saudi, but more films about, a lot of subject matters that it's about time to talk about. And I feel this will generate more conversation. Of course, we will always have our limits as as a culture of limits, but we also have more we also have a bigger platform to speak about our experiences.
I think that's a really good note to end on. So I'd like to thank you so much, Shahad, for joining us. Diolch yn fawr iawn. I've been really excited to screen this film, and really, really pleased that you're able to join us. Thank you, Abattoir, as well, for supporting us, because a lot of Abattoir's audience have really enjoyed and appreciated this film too. And thank you all, the audience, for coming along this evening and asking some really great intelligent questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. I was so happy to be here, and thank you so much for screening the film. I'm so glad people got to watch it in Wales, and yeah, I enjoyed all the questions. Thank you all for watching the film.
Thank you, Shahad. Thank you.